Before we begin, I'd like to welcome my fellow board members, Vice Chair Michelle Yan, Secretary Maura Marino, Treasurer Carissa Stanley Beatty, Board Member Tony Williams, Board Member Jim Sandman, and I'd like to welcome my fellow board members, Vice Chair Michelle Yan, Secretary Maura Marino, Treasurer Carissa Stanley Beatty, Board Member Tony Williams, Board Member Jim Sandman, and Okay, sorry about that. It was here we go. Where did I leave off? Welcoming board member Sandman, and a special welcome to our newest board member, Anna Smith, who joined us last month. And we are so delighted to have you on the board and just look forward to your leadership and your perspectives moving forward. So welcome. As students, families, and educators head back to the schoolhouse in the school year, this is really an important moment for us as a board to set our direction for the work ahead. Our theme for this meeting is setting the course, centering students in the work ahead. And our message is simple: new school year, same mission, shared purpose. That shared purpose starts with our students. As a board, we are entering this year with a clear sense of purpose and urgency. We are focused on strengthening accountability, setting ambitious expectations for excellence, planning proactively for the future of the sector, creating space for responsible innovation, and ensuring that the public charter schools continue to make a meaningful contribution to the DC education system. These priorities will serve as our call to action, helping us stay focused on outcomes, make thoughtful and transparent decisions, and keep students at the center of the work ahead. And they're especially important as we begin a new school year. They require us to ask not only how public charter schools are performing today, but what conditions we must create for every school and every student to thrive tomorrow. That means centering student outcomes in our decisions, strengthening our partnership with schools, being clear and transparent about our expectations, and using data and insights to identify both challenges and opportunities across the sector. And when we talk about meeting the diverse needs of DC learners, we mean all of our learners, from our youngest pre-K students taking their first big steps into a classroom, to our adult learners continuing to pursue their goals, and every student in between across all 8 wards. They are who this work is about. And as we set the course for the year ahead, we want to make sure we never lose sight of that. Tonight, we are taking an important step in organizing the board's work around those priorities. I'm pleased to formally designate 2 new committees of the board. First, the Sector Planning Committee and the Academic Data and Accountability Committee. These committees will help us put that focus into action, strengthening our attention to student outcomes and academic quality, while creating space for thoughtful, forward-looking conversations about the future of the public charter sector. As we undertake this work, we also know that no single school, agency, or organization can do it alone. It takes all of us working together: schools, families, educators, community partners, and government agencies to create and sustain strong, diverse educational opportunities for DC students. That spirit of partnership will be essential in the year ahead. Again, new school year, same mission, shared purpose. And that purpose is ensuring that every decision we make keeps students at the center and moves us closer to a public charter sector where every learner has the opportunity to succeed, compete, and thrive. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Walker Davis.
Thank you, Chair Adamafanian, and good evening to members of the board, colleagues, school leaders, families, and members of the public joining us tonight. As we welcome to Board Member Smith for your first meeting. Chair Adamafanian, thank you for setting the tone for the year ahead. New school year, same mission, shared purpose. For my team, that purpose means keeping students at the center while doing the work that helps create the conditions for schools to be strong, stable, and successful. Tonight's agenda balances setting clear expectations, holding schools accountable, recognizing different school contexts, and continuous improvement toward better outcomes for students. First, we will have a public hearing on the proposed financial oversight policy. The proposed policy seeks to more clearly define the circumstances under which DCPCSB would revoke a charter on financial grounds. Financial health may seem removed from the classroom, but it is fundamental to school quality. Students need schools that are not only academically strong, but financially sound and positioned to serve them well for the long term. Next, we will discuss the School Finance Monthly Report, including updates from the board's Finance Committee. Together, these items reinforce our core authorizing principle: clear expectations, rigorous oversight, and transparent decision-making. On the consent calendar, staff recommends continuing the Alternative Accountability Framework designation for Goodwill Excel PCS and St. Coletta PCS. Both schools continue to meet the eligibility criteria. This recommendation reminds us that strong accountability also requires us to understand the students and communities our schools serve. We can maintain ambitious expectations while using appropriate measures to understand quality, progress, and student success. And that brings me to the final item I want to highlight tonight: how our students are doing academically. 2 weeks ago, the district released the 2026 DC CAPE results. While DC CAPE provides essential proficiency data, it is important to remember that it represents just one metric within our Aspire system. These results give us a valuable view of where our sector is making progress, where strong outcomes are occurring, and where we must accelerate growth. Our message tonight is simple: progress, not victory. Public charter school proficiency increased again this year, and we see individual schools producing strong results and meaningful gains. But we also know that too many students are not yet meeting grade level expectations, particularly in math. We should recognize progress and learn from it, but we should also be clear about the distance we still have to travel. Because as we set the course for the year ahead, we need to be clear about where we are, ambitious about where we are going, and focused on what it will take to get every student there. I do have a presentation that I would like to share, and I'll ask the team to project that.
Give me just one moment, Dr. Walker.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. As we celebrate 30 years of public charter schools serving students and families across the district, our fundamental promise remains the same. Families deserve quality public school options, and schools must be accountable for delivering strong student outcomes. So as we look at the results that I'm about to share, our message remains straightforward. We see progress, but progress alone is not the destination. Before we get to this year's results, it's important to put them in context. Over 3 decades, DC's standards and assessments have changed, from DC CAST to PARC to DC CAPE, so direct comparisons across assessments should be made carefully. But the broader trajectory is clear. Public charter schools have continued to adapt, strengthen instruction, and work toward stronger outcomes for students. This year, 35% of public charter school students met or exceeded expectations in ELA, and 23.2% did so in math. Both represent continued improvement. Since testing resumed in 2021-22, ELA proficiency has increased by 9.6 percentage points and math by 7.2 percentage points. Looking just at the past year-over-year performance, public charter school proficiency increased 2.6 percentage points in ELA and 1.5 percentage points in math. That progress is meaningful, and it reflects the hard work happening every day in classrooms across our city. But our responsibility as an authorizer requires us to look beyond a single number or a single year. We want to understand where students are thriving, where outcomes are improving, where progress has stalled, and where greater urgency or intervention may be needed. It's also important to understand who our schools serve. As the next few slides show, the demographics of public charter school students differ in important ways from the citywide population. For example, charter test takers include higher percentages of economically disadvantaged students and students with disabilities than citywide averages. Demographics explain context, but they do not lower our bar. Next. So when we look at these results, we need to understand not only whether proficiency is increasing, but who is benefiting from that progress and where gaps remain. Ultimately, excellence has to reach every learner. In ELA, public charter school students are performing close to the statewide rate in several student groups, and economically disadvantaged students are performing at the same rate as their peers statewide. We also see areas where gaps remain. In math, we see a similar story, but also a greater sense of urgency. Charter performance for economically disadvantaged and Black students is close to the statewide rate, while larger gaps remain for several other student groups. And with only 23% of public charter school students reaching proficiency in math overall, we know the bar must be higher. Our focus is not simply on closing gaps with the state, it's on seeing progress for every student and learning from the schools that are demonstrating what is possible. Sector-wide averages also don't tell the whole story. Across the city, we have public charter campuses outperforming the statewide proficiency rate in ELA, math, and both subjects. The detailed slides that follow identify those campuses and their results. We should also recognize those schools and remain focused on learning from them. Strong performance is happening across the city. 28 public charter school campuses outperformed the state in ELA, 28 outperformed the state in math, and 19 exceeded the statewide proficiency rate in both subjects. Our priority is to learn from these schools, analyze what drives their success, and help spread those effective practices. When we look beyond the sector-wide average, we see strong performance happening across individual schools. These are the schools that outperformed the state average in ELA. We see a similar story in math. And this matters particularly given the broader challenges we continue to see in math. And when we look across both subjects, ELA and math, the schools outperforming the citywide average are spread across the city. These are the schools that are outperforming the state average on both subjects. Finally, DC CAPE is an important measure, but it is not the entire picture of school quality. In January, we will release for the first time Aspire results that include a summative level and score. Aspire, as you know, looks beyond proficiency alone to provide a broader view that includes school progress, school achievement, school environment, and school-specific performance across 5 frameworks. That's important because accountability should help us understand both where students are today and whether schools are helping them move forward. These results are not simply an annual reporting exercise. We use them to inform our oversight, identify where stronger outcomes are needed, understand where excellence is occurring, and learn where there are opportunities for the sector to improve. So I want to end where I began. There is progress to recognize, but progress is not the destination. Our goal is a public charter sector that continuously moves forward to excellence, where expectations are clear, accountability is meaningful and transparent, strong practices are shared, and every school is contributing to better opportunities and outcomes for DC students. That is how we set the course, by being clear about where we are, ambitious about where we are going, and unwavering about who must remain at the center of it all, our students. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or engage in discussion about these results.
Dr. Walker Davis, thank you so much for your presentation. I'll say that I do really appreciate the opportunity to see the results in the way as it has been organized. I'm encouraged that we are moving in the right direction and that there are schools across the city demonstrating every day what is possible for our young people. But I am just reminded, and I leave this conversation with an even greater sense of urgency with respect to our pace of growth and change. And our families are not asking us simply to be better than where we were last year, but they are trusting us with their children and expecting us to deliver on the promise of high quality education. And so that means that we just have to keep pushing. As I know that you know, as I know that the team knows, I know our leaders have expressed, as I've had conversations with many of them. But we really just have to keep pushing, not just for aggregate improvement, but to make sure that every student group is moving forward. And so there's work ahead. I believe in our sector. I believe in the leadership of our team, our staff, and certainly in partnership with this board to move forward. And so I look forward to continuing to celebrate our growth and accelerating the pace of that. And so with that, I also want to invite other colleagues, if you all have any remarks or anything you'd like to share before we move forward.
I just wanted to echo your thanks, Dr. Walker Davis. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for all the information that you and your team have provided in the last few weeks. You know, these scores are still relatively hot off the presses, and you and the team have done a lot of work to make sure that we're beginning to understand this data and what it means in context. And I also just wanted to offer my congratulations to the students, to the families, to the school communities who saw real growth and improvement this year. It's really exciting and we're celebrating, and I'm looking forward to time together as a board this fall to really understand this data more deeply and think about what we can do to ensure that as a sector we are truly meeting the needs of all students across the city and continuing to raise the bar for quality across the city and specifically for charter schools. So thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Marino. Any other board members? All right, I look forward to the work ahead. Thank you all. All right. At the beginning of every board meeting, we reserve time to hear testimony from members of the public who've signed up to speak. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes, and public officials may speak for up to 5 minutes. If you have additional thoughts you'd like to share beyond your allotted time, we welcome written testimony, which can be emailed to public.comment@dcpcsb.org. To register to speak or submit written comment, please visit our website at dcpcsb.org under the Public Comment tab. You can also email comments to, again, public.comment@dcpcsb.org, or leave voicemail testimony by calling 202-328-2660 and selecting option 2. All submitted comments are available on our website. And as I call your name, you'll be promoted from the attendee pool and unmuted. Let's hear first from Valerie Jablow. You have 2 minutes to speak. Welcome.
Thank you. I am Valerie Jablow, a DC public education analyst. The draft financial oversight policy relies substantially on clean audits and judgment without any apparent underpinning of publicly outlined processes, timelines, and metrics. Consider that Eagle Academy had clean audits in 2017, 2018, and 2019, all documented interest-bearing loans from staff members, which is against both the SRA and IRS law. But as far as I know, nothing was said about that publicly. So while this draft policy mentions the charter board's responsibility to respond promptly to, quote, evidence of fiscal mismanagement, unquote, it is unsaid who or what provides that evidence and precisely when and how. It is also unsaid whether audits are routinely read in their entirety by PCSB, OSSI, and or OCFO. The draft policy also does not and should bring routine scrutiny to unrestricted cash and investments in DC charters. These resources are publicly untethered to what each charter LEA is doing at any given moment, leaving an annually growing but functionally unknown trove of hundreds of millions in DC taxpayer funds. For example, DC Prep a few years ago hired an investment manager to invest $30 million, but this was outlined only in a DC Prep board meeting. DC taxpayers deserve to know why and what our charter entities are paying investment managers. Some LEAs also have real estate holdings not directly used for their education purposes and not publicly outlined in audits. The draft policy also makes no mention of outsized salaries nor says anything about repeated notices of fiscal concern. Before 2018, PCSB had a line item for philanthropic revenue in annual FARs. Since then, PCSB lumps together all grants and donations for each charter LEA in public reporting. While Charter 990s can outline grants and donations, they often do not specify donors nor whether the money is recurring. All of that effectively hides revenue outside DC funding, which for some LEAs is considerable. Good fiscal oversight means making routine, consistent connections on all of these. That requires publicly outlined processes, timelines, and metrics, which this draft policy lacks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jablow, for your comments. Excellent. Thank you. Next, we want to call forward Jennifer Leonard. Has Jennifer been promoted?
Coming right up.
Thank you so much. Hey, wonderful. I see Jennifer there. Welcome. Jennifer, you have 2 minutes to speak. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Adam Efanian and members of the DC Public Charter School Board. My name is Jennifer Leonard, and I serve as the Chief Financial Officer at DC Scholars Public Charter School. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here this evening, exactly 2 years and 2 weeks after coming before this board, different composition, regarding the financial state and future of Eagle Academy Public Charter School. Likely no one wants to revisit the details of the months leading to Eagle's closure, so I'll only make the reference to note that the financial oversight policy is a positive result of lessons learned and applied from the Eagle Academy experience, in part, to inform this new policy. And to share that what was needed at the time is precisely what this policy provides: transparency and clarity with respect to data markers and the process that will be followed to measure the financial health of a public charter school and to determine where the school falls on the oversight ladder. Notably and critically, it also lays out the timing and cadence for when the various measures will be reviewed while providing crystal clear standards. As you will likely hear from other members representing the charter sector, the policy development was a collaborative, iterative, and thoughtful one. And I thank and applaud the PCSB staff, in particular Will Henderson, for consistently asking for and receiving feedback, and for approaching and following through with this work with professionalism, expert and stakeholder engagement, and servant leadership. As a member of the working group for the policy and a participant in the Charter Alliance Finance Leaders meetings, which PCSB attended several times to share updates and request feedback, I can't identify one stone unturned or considered both thoughtfully and graciously. As I mentioned, I serve at DC Scholars Public Charter School now. I believe this policy will serve DC Scholars and all of our charter community well, and I wholeheartedly endorse approval of the policy. I look forward to the implementation and continued collaboration on this and other future PCSB financial policies. Thank you for your time and attention this evening.
And thank you, Jennifer, for your remarks and for your service on the working group. Much appreciation. And thank you for your partnership. All right. Next, we will call forward Pat Brantley. Wonderful. Pat, I see you there. Welcome. You have 2 minutes to speak. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I want to start by applauding this work. For 30 years, these standards have lived partly in statute and partly in practice. Putting them on paper matters, and there is much here to commend. independent auditors for GAAP, requiring both knowledge and failure to act, and timing revocation decisions to the lottery. The implementation guide is real progress too, and I'm grateful to the staff and the working group for it. I wholeheartedly support passage in tandem with public posting of the implementation guide, and that is my one substantive point tonight. Read the policy on its own, and you will find 3 grounds for revocation. But most of what governs what happens before that point sits elsewhere. The early warning, the graduated response, the corrective action plan, all of that is in the implementation guide. The policy tells you when to close a school. The guide is what might actually keep you from having to do so. Yet that guide is not yet public, even though it is the other half of this work. The guide creates 4 levels of oversight, and its indicators will begin being used in first quarter reviews this fall. The ruler exists, and it should be part of the public rulebook. And so I ask 3 things. First, vote yes on the policy, but release the guide with or before your vote. Second, decide where the 4 escalation levels belong, in the policy itself or in a guide the policy references. And third, direct staff to return by a date certain on board notification, relinquishment, and measuring trajectory. My written testimony explains the why for those issues, but briefly. Eagle's days of cash fell from 92 to 12 to 6, a trajectory of decline that would not be caught in the policy until it had fallen from 90 to 30 days. Eagle's board was largely unaware of its financial problems nearly a year into monitoring by the PCSB, and Eagle ultimately closed through relinquishment, which neither document addresses. My greatest hope is this, that we can one day answer a question with confidence. That question, had this policy been in effect in June of 23, would the 362 children at Eagle have had a different August? I believe that with the implementation guide finalized and published alongside the policy and relinquishment addressed, they would have. Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you so much for your remarks, and thank you for your engagement in this work. Much appreciation. And last, we will have Rachel Johnston. Rachel? Welcome, Rachel. You have 2 minutes to speak. Welcome.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute there.
It's all right.
Good evening, Chair Autumn Afanian and members of the Public Charter School Board. My name is Rachel Johnston. I'm the Chief of Staff at the DC Charter School Alliance. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the financial oversight policy. This is an important policy for the charter sector. The School Reform Act requires DC PCSB to revoke the charter of an LEA that has demonstrated a pattern of non-adherence to generally accepted accounting principles, a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, or is no longer economically viable. The financial oversight policy provides important clarity and transparency around how PCSB will carry out that responsibility. For each of these 3 areas, the policy defines the standards DC PCSB will apply and establishes decision-making norms, including opportunities for schools to remedy concerns and expectations on the timing of decisions. This gives schools greater clarity and the public greater transparency into how significant financial oversight decisions will be made. I also want to highlight the process DC PCSB staff used to develop this policy. PCSB staff convened a working group of charter school finance leaders representing a diverse cross-section of the sector, including large and small LEAs and both adult and pre-K through 12 schools. The working group was supported by external consultants and provided an opportunity for practitioners with deep financial expertise to inform the policy as it was developed. PCSB staff also regularly engaged the broader sector throughout the process, including providing updates and soliciting feedback through the DC Alliance's finance leaders meetings. That gave finance leaders beyond the working group multiple opportunities to understand the direction of the policy, ask questions, and provide input. This was a thoughtful and collaborative process, and the resulting policy is therefore one that is simple, clear, and balanced. We look forward to continuing to engage with the PCSB staff as this policy rolls out. We already have them scheduled to attend our October Finance Leaders meeting to review the accompanying implementation guidance. To that end, I come before you tonight in support of the financial oversight policy and recommend that the board adopt it. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you again to our speakers this evening. This concludes the apologies. All right, very good. I don't know what part I left off on, but I'll just say thank you again to our speakers this evening. This concludes our public comment portion of our agenda. And next on the agenda, we will hold a public hearing on the proposed financial oversight policy. I yield the floor now to Will Henderson, Chief Operating Officer, to introduce the policy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, board members, for taking some time to hear about and discuss the financial oversight policy that staff is bringing to you today. I offered some remarks at the June board meeting where I highlighted and oriented you all to the policy. And so today I'll briefly touch on some of those points as my presentation is getting pulled up. And then I hope we'll have an opportunity to field some questions for you. Additionally, William Half from Yield Creative is here with us tonight, and at some point he'll pop off onto camera, and we'll have an opportunity to ask him some questions too. Yield Creative was the organization that supported us in the research and the connection with third party and other perspectives in the sector and engagement with our LEAs, and inevitably helped us with the creation of the policy. So if we can get here it goes. So again, this is a shorter version of what I shared in June. We can keep on moving. And I'm going to touch overview the policy and then talk briefly about public comment and our timeline. So as we move to slide 3, you should all be familiar with the 3 critical parts of the authorizer's role in charter accountability. Those are academics, organizational or operational standards, and of course, finance. And so today, we are bringing to the board a financial oversight policy that offers more clarity to the explaining the financial expectations that are laid out in the School Reform Act. Moving on to the next slide, we had a lot of discussion over the last year and a half about why our financial oversight needed to evolve. Our LEAs were experienced in planning for a funding cliff after the COVID crisis. There were a lot of resources that were rightly offered to schools, but those resources dried up at the end of FY25. We've already discussed or heard briefly tonight or been reminded about the challenging experience of the Eagle Academy closure. This was also in response to our role in the city and how this agency supports financial health, and it holds our LEAs, our charter LEAs, to high financial standards. And as we think about some of our earlier conversations this evening, as we kick off this school year, my personal belief is that the healthy financial school allows leaders and this agency itself to be able to focus specifically on improving academic rigor. And so this policy helps create an environment where the experts in the classrooms are able to focus most clearly on that work. And then lastly, in this season, we've heard both from you all, this board, and our schools that we needed some clarification from the School Reform Act terminology. So as you heard a bit in our public comment, there was a lot of additional content that we pulled in from multiple places, and we engaged a lot of the community. We had rigorous discussions with DC PCSB Finance Committee that our treasurer chairs, and we did a landscape analysis. We looked at other schools that had both experienced financial challenges unsuccessfully and also had experienced financial challenges and returned to and continue to operate in the city. We also had lengthy discussions with LEA leaders, with the deputy mayor's office, with the alliance, and with EdOps, who is one of which is the primary but not only third party accountant for a lot of our LEAs. So as we look at the policy, the School Reform Act gives us clear instructions and statutory basis for when we are expected to revoke an LEA's charter, and that is when there is an observed pattern of non-adherence to generally accepted accounting principles, a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, or when economic non-viability has been stated. The policy provides definition and parameters by which the board will exercise its statutory responsibilities. This includes things like specifying what non-adherence to GAAP means in terms of specific audit results, what a pattern of non-adherence means, what specific fiscal mismanagement issues, such as procurement practices or financial control issues, may give rise to findings of fiscal mismanagement, and what the measure for economic viability, in fact, is. The policy also sets expectations for the timing of decisions while ensuring that there is an exigent circumstance carve-out that enables the board, you all, to act at any time an emergency financial situation arises at a school. And so that is the policy that we bring to you tonight. Of course, we had a couple of written comments submitted before, and then we heard from 4 members of the broader community just now. So to that end, we are looking to bring this to a vote at the September meeting. But before that, I wanted to create an opportunity for you all to ask me or others any questions. One other piece that came up that we is a part of our plan that I guess we can move on to the next slide, our final slide. Yep. So the public comment. We opened this for public comment in June, and the public comment period was open until today, where the public hearing is, because July was our recess month, and we were expecting for a vote on the policy in September. And as we discussed tonight, we have circulated implementation guidance. All of our policies come in time with guidance that further articulates what boots on the ground should feel like and what a school should expect. And so we are prepared to release that implementation guidance immediately upon the board's vote so that our LEAs know what we will be holding them accountable to. And furthermore, the policy asks that we annually release any revisions or modifications to the implementation guidance. And so we believe that the best time to do that is the springtime, so approximately April, so that an LEA has the clarity around the expected standards that they will be evaluated upon, and as it pertains to this policy, before they take their budget to their board for a vote. So that's a little bit about the timeline, about what you all, the board, should be experiencing and expecting to vote on, and what our school should expect in time. So we can take my presentation down and we can certainly pop it back up, but I wanted to create an opportunity for you all to ask me any questions, and I believe William Half from Yield Creative is going to pop up and join us as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Will. Thank you to, again, the working group. Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty, for your leadership as well. This is very exciting. But I will now turn it to Board Member Sandman. I believe if you have a comment or question. Board Member Sandman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank and commend you, Will, and my colleague, Treasurer Stanley Beatty, for your work on this. I'm a member of the Finance Committee and participated in this work, but you both did the heavy lifting. Thank you for that. I think this policy does 2 very important things. First, it adds clear definitional guidance to the very spare language of the School Reform Act regarding the circumstances under which we must revoke or not renew the charter of a school. Second, it draws that definitional guidance from well-established, widely accepted standards in accounting and fiscal management. You didn't make this stuff up. It is firmly grounded in best practices and well-established standards. I think those two things are critically important. The language of the School Reform Act is not at all detailed and does not provide clear guidance either to the board or to the charter school community about what the standards for revocation for fiscal reasons are. I do want to make one suggestion and would appreciate your reaction, Will. I agree with what Pat Brantley said about the wisdom of releasing simultaneously the guidance that has accompanied the development of this new policy. As she pointed out, the policy itself deals only with the relatively narrow question of the circumstances under which we will revoke or not review a charter. But it doesn't address everything that comes before that, the buildup. That's the last act in the play. If we've been doing our job right, there's been a lot that's preceded it. And that's where the guidance comes in. I think that should be readily available to people. I think it's important that it be a part of the public record, and I would advocate releasing it simultaneously with the issuance of the policy itself. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Board Member Sandman. And I appreciate that perspective, and certainly appreciate Ms. Brantley's perspective too. And we are prepared to do that. The Alliance reached out to me. I'm not sure exactly when, but sometime, and asked for a version of that. And we've been all along have been preparing to release the first implementation guidance within a week or two of the policy, and that's been the case all along. And we are happy to do that. And the implementation guidance would be living on our website. And again, we would invite an opportunity as we learn lessons prior to each approximate April release to learn together, both from you all in the Finance Committee, but also from our LEAs about what the lived experience of this oversight will feel like. And we'll intend to release, repost or re-release an updated version each approximate April going forward. So appreciate that and Ms. Brantley's perspective, and intend to do a version of just that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Sandman, and Will, thank you for the quick response there. I think that's really important in partnership. Now turn it over to Treasurer Stanley Beatty. Yeah, Treasurer, please.
Thank you, Chair Adamafania. Thank you to Will and team. You can take a deep sigh of relief.
Not yet.
Well, you're almost there. I think it goes without saying I'm supportive of the policy. I think it's not only thoughtful, but I think it's also a balanced framework that allows us to promote accountability, but also be flexible enough so that we can apply sound judgment. So I am in full support of the policy. And I echo Board Member Sandman's comments, and I'm glad that he raised them because they were going to be a part of my questions as well. But so I don't want to cover what he's already covered. I want to draw a couple of connections, Will, as it relates to the implementation guide. So you talked about the release of it. You talked about once it is released, and I heard you say within 1 to 2 weeks, hopefully it's not longer than that.
Yeah.
But 1 to 2 weeks we'll release it. And then the idea is that you will then refresh it annually. Let's talk about in terms of the implementation guide, because that's where, as was said in public comment, that's where sort of the meat of this lives, right? So what does board oversight look like in relation to the implementation guide? Board oversight, and then also public transparency.
So in terms of public transparency, the implementation guidance will live on our website. And so it calls us to at certain points for when notification happens. It asks us to notify when fiscal challenges occur. It asks us to notify in an organized way so that the school has an opportunity to take corrective action. I think Miss Brantley also stated like schools should. We're not aiming to revoke unless we have to. Schools should have an opportunity to course correct, and so the spirit of the work and the spirit of the policy, and certainly the implementation guidance, ask staff at PCSB and you all to give clarity about the challenge, like overtly state what the challenge is so the school has a chance to do something about that. And again, so back to the transparency part, that is all going to be available on our website, and as are the when our scrutiny increases through the monitoring list, that remains public on our website to include the identifying clearly what the challenge is that placed an LEA on the monitoring list, or if you go through the oversight process, escalating from a monitoring list is the FCAP. I'll pause on the FCAP briefly because there's an additional piece of action that brings something back to you all, to the board. This board votes on a financial corrective action plan. And so, as you can imagine, an LEA that is moving towards revocation, hoping to move themselves away from that, are going to find themselves in those spaces for different reasons. All of our schools are very different and have different challenges. The FCAP is the space, the implementation space, where we get to work together, we meaning staff, board, you all, and the LEA, to identify exactly what moving back towards financial help actually means, so that it doesn't need to be a blanket application, when one school over another may have very, very different experiences and scenarios. So let's see. I'm losing myself a little bit. So I got on a roll. To back up and tell me what I've missed, Treasurer.
That's okay. No. That was a really good explanation. Let me ask you the question a different way.
Yep.
The actual document, the actual implementation guidance, the document.
Yep.
What is the board oversight of that document, right? Because
Yep.
that document contains KFIs, it contains your weighting of certain KFIs. It essentially is the how you will perform what's in the policy. So how do we as the board interact with that implementation guide,
Yep.
and specifically the changes to it?
Yep. So thank you. I knew there was something critical that I had omitted completely.
I'll get you there.
I know. I wasn't worried about it. So, I mean, that's in large part what the Finance Committee is for. So, that is a standing committee. Our chair mentioned some ad hoc committees that she is instituting starting today, but this is not an ad hoc committee. It's a standing committee. And so,
Yep.
let's say we learn something new about the value of a specific KFI or the failure of a specific KFI. That's content that I am and the staff would bring to the Finance Committee and bring to our LEAs to discuss. Is there a different KFI, or is there a different application of a KFI? You and I spoke a lot through the last year about like incorporating better trend analysis, for example. That's how we would incorporate that and say, actually, this trend tells a better earlier story than this other KFI. And so the purpose of the Finance Committee is to support you all, to have influence on and to hear directly from us about what we are learning, and to support us in all of that. And so
Perfect. And so the way that it might look in practice is that there is some learning or some information that perhaps we want to see reflected in the implementation guide because it's best practice or it's something that we've learned. And so in Finance Committee, you would suggest those changes, make those changes, and then you would report that out to the board before the changes to the implementation guide happen. Is that what it looks like in practice?
yes, I mean, we
Okay.
would want to, we would want to make sure the whole board was aware of the changes that we are making. And so we have a few modes of how we do that. But yes, the rest of the board would be privy to the choices that the Finance Committee and I would be working on together.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Let's talk about like KFIs and how we're using that. And you mentioned the trend analysis, but just sort of the KFIs and the trending in terms of financial oversight. So talk to me, and I want to raise this for the good of the order. Let's say we're doing a financial analysis or an annual review, and there are 2 or 3 KFIs that we sort of that raise our spidey sense, right? Like if an LEA for whatever reason is below where we would want to see it on 1 or 2 KFIs, that in and of itself does not trigger revocation. Talk through how we use the KFIs, how we use the trend analysis, how we will use financial oversight policy to guide that LEA to financial health or some other disposition.
Yeah, or just clarity so that the school
Yep.
themselves can take the actions that they need
Yep.
within their control. Yep. So failing to meet one KFI would mean that staff would move the LEA from standard oversight to the monitoring list for increased oversight. And we would then be obligated to explain exactly what happened. Like, this is the KFI that has not met our expectation. As part of this, staff would perform outreach with the school to gather any additional contextual information related to the area of underperformance. So we would begin increasing our scrutiny to understand what's going on there. The school would be added to the public monitoring list, so the general public would be privy to that information. And when we place an LEA on the monitoring list, of course, it increases the type of financial information that we require that a school gives us. And sometimes it increases the cadence that we ask that LEA to report out to us while they are working on improving and strengthening that area of concern. So essentially, when an LEA fails to meet the expectations laid out in a KFI, it sets the path of increased transparency and increased financial scrutiny from us, so that we can then make sure that we are being clear to the school, to the school's board, and to you all about what it's going to take for the school to get back on the proper path, or help you all and us start predicting if additional oversight and accountability is then required.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. And then just 2 more questions, Chair Adamafani, and then I'll yield my time back. Let's talk about economic viability and fiscal mismanagement, right? Because those are 2 things under the SRA that require us to act. GAP is a little different because that's audits and things, but fiscal mismanagement and economic viability. So in the case where you and your team may feel like either one of those exists, right? What does that process look like as it interacts with the financial policy? What are the things that you do? How do you come to the board? How are your actions in those circumstances guided by the policy and the implementation guide?
So the policy asks us to create an environment in a normal scenario, a typical scenario, so not an exigent circumstance, but just a normal scenario, to create an environment where you all can, where you all can make a decision about a revocation in time for those children or those students to participate in the lottery. Okay. So,
which we didn't have before.
That's correct.
It was not explicitly written that we needed to be considerate. I'll use the word considerate, but it's much stronger than in the language of the lottery.
Exactly. Yeah. So to be able to provide the right level of information and analysis for you to be able to make that action, staff have to start acting much earlier. So when we have the concern about economic viability, for example, we should be concerned and not know. If we know, then we are moving towards revocation, right? So goodness, sorry. So I apologize. I lost my place in my notes, and I wanted to make sure I
Okay,
was
that's good.
communicating the right thing.
If we know, like you said, we should be moving towards revocation, but
Right, that's what.
if we suspect or if we have
Suspect.
concerns rather.
Yep. So that is when we would then place an LA, we would have the information in our hands to place an LAA on the monitoring list. And we are communicating with the board and the finance committee and in other avenues for communicating what has caused the concern, what is the instance of fiscal mismanagement, right? So not a pattern, but the instance, and what would it then asks us to define for you all and the school itself what would then constitute a pattern. And so it asks us to define faster and sooner to offer better transparency to the LEA so that they know what success looks like, and also offers transparency and clarity to you all so that you know when the mile markers are coming, that you should expect new information that we've asked from the LEA itself, so that we can better predict, all moving towards a safe and healthy decision one way or the other in time for the lottery, for example. When an LEA, if an LEA continues to deteriorate after we place them on the monitoring list for a given scenario, then we move into the financial corrective action. I already spoke about that momentarily, but that's the space where we get into the meat and potatoes for a given scenario. It's all the things that are going to cause a financial challenge for a school are going to be very, very specific. And the board, when you all vote on a financial corrective action plan, we have worked together to identify what health should look like and what our expectations are. And the FCAP gives us a little bit of space where the school has proven health for a period of time before we take them off of the financial corrective action plan. The other thing that I think is important here that's connected to lessons learned is that the SRA makes non-adherence to GAAP, pattern and fiscal mismanagement, and economically non-viability. Those are three separate things. And we had been challenged through the years about conflating those two. As you can imagine, some pieces of them look similar. This policy asks us and you all together to make a decision about what is the problem we are addressing and moving that, piece of the puzzle towards a revocation decision. It doesn't mean a school can't have challenges in both. It could have a challenge in both, but it asks us much early in the process to explain the two different things. And so we are moving down the two paths. We can do that transparently, but they are separate and distinct.
It forces you to isolate and identify.
That's right. Earlier.
Which we previously sort of didn't have the language or the context to do.
That's right.
Okay, and then one last question. This policy offers opportunities to remedy in various different circumstances. What are our thoughts as it relates to those opportunities? What might that look like? The language allows for some, I'm assuming, flexibility, but we talk about opportunities to remedy and then also satisfactory progress, and I think reasonable opportunity, but we use those words. What does that mean, and how are we thinking about it?
So in large part, that is about, setting fair rules of the road for a school and requiring us, both staff and you all, to be clear with a school. Don't change the rules of the game in the middle of the game. Tell me the game we're playing here and let me work on that. So in large part, a bit of an oversimplification. There's some more details in the implementation guidance, but in large part, it's about communication. So an opportunity to remedy, I may not tell you what you must do, but I will tell you, meaning the LEA and the LEA's board, tell you that this is the problem. This KFI did not meet the standard. You need to meet the standard. And that's, now I've given you clarity about what the problem is. And then that begins to give you the chance as the LEA, the opportunity to remedy. The most obvious example, of course, is the FCAP. That's the most blatant one, right? It's voted on by you all. It's a longer document. It's collaborative. It takes some time to put together. It identifies a bunch of things. There's already established financial challenge. But there are other opportunities for remedy that we are obliged to give schools earlier in the process. And again, to one of our those that testified, we want our schools to succeed financially so that they can stay focused on the academic experience of their children in the classroom or their students in the classroom. And we also need to make sure that we are giving information to LEA boards early enough so that the boards can do their job in holding school staff accountable. So the opportunities for remedy, of course, it's going to be a little bit more nuanced depending on the given KFI we're talking about, but it's all about transparent communication between us and the LEA.
And those opportunities are identified. Let's say, for example, there's something that lands them on the monitoring list. Could opportunities exist as early as the monitoring list, or would they only exist, for example, in an FCAP?
No, they should. They should exist as early as the monitoring list.
Mm-hmm. And the school would be aware of that, and they would know the timing.
Yes, and which has been our practice now, but as was discussed earlier tonight, it was not consistently our practice, and prior. When an LEA goes on the monitoring list, their board chair is also notified, right? And so like it's all of that. That is our practice now, and yeah.
Okay. Last question just on timing, and then I'm done. So assuming that this gets voted on in the September meeting, that is the clean cut point for when this policy is approved, right?
Yep.
Talk to me about how that looks in terms of implementation. Is it just as clean in implementation as it is in the policy approval? And what that means for LEAs?
Yeah. So as with any policy vote in existence, there's a little bit of an awkward period before there's full implementation, 100%. Not full implementation, but full application. So, for example, our LEAs have finished fiscal year 26. The year is over. This vote will happen in the middle of fiscal year 27. Then we, PCSB, will release the financial analysis report for FY26 after the board vote. But the FY26 FAR, what will be applied to that report will be the currently established KFIs.
The pre-September KFIs.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay. But in the FY27 FAR, we will report on using the new implementation guidance, the new KFIs. In the FY26 FAR, we have told LEAs that we will have some little minor addendum just communicating about what the new KFIs might look like. And in the FY27 FAR, we would have an addendum that would communicate what the old KFIs might have looked like. That is designed to help the transition and translation between the two. If I scored this on this KFI in this year, the modified, evolved KFIs here, so you can look at both in both places for a couple of years, but you're being held accountable. Your analysis is being held accountable in the FY26 FAR based on the old KFIs and that FY27 based on the new KFIs. So pretty quickly in this fall, with probably our Q1 or Q2 analysis, our staff will start analyzing the quarterly financials we get with the new KFIs that we will have released. And so new information that comes to the table for us after this policy, we will utilize the new KFIs in the implementation guidance we'll use that analysis to analyze them. Mixing up my word choices here, but you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Going forward. So thank you for that. I think it's important to get the timing out for the board as well as for the broader sector. So thank you for doing that. And then I think most important out of everything that you just said is that these sort of cut points don't live in the policy itself, right? Yeah. So for LEAs to understand which KFIs we're using to do analysis or evaluation, that exists in the implementation guide.
Mhm.
Okay, so that is in the guide, as well as any escalation, as well as how we would apply any early warnings. All of that exists in the implementation guide, which is separate from the policy.
Correct.
Okay, very good. All right, so thank you. Thank you, Chair Adamafania.
Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. Board Member Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I had a couple questions, and one of them, I think Carissa got at, but I guess I want to maybe just be a little bit clearer and cleaner on here, which is, when is it that an LEA's board is brought into the conversation? Is that just on the monitor? Is that when they hit the monitoring list? Is that when, when we reach out initially? And I think what it's at the heart of my question here is that I think one lesson that I observed from Eagle, I wasn't on the board at the time, but one lesson that I observed was that responsibility really can become diffuse among school leadership and their governing boards, auditors, outside financial partners. And and in the end, it's really the LEA's board who is truly responsible. And so when is it, like, I really want to understand, like, when is it that that conversation with them starts?
Yep. So any formal notice that connects to the financial health of the school, we include the board chair on. So the monitoring list is the most obvious one. You've missed some target. And so the board is notified then and there. But if there was a precursor to that, something is about to happen that wouldn't place you on a monitoring list. I don't have a perfect example right in front of me. But the board would get communicated that information as well. So with this policy and the corresponding guidance, it does move our scrutiny up earlier and our public scrutiny up earlier, so that and all of that is we are informing the board of immediately.
So, let me then follow up on this question here, because I think where I guess another part, and some of our public comment from, I think, Ms. Jablo got towards this, just the speed at which sometimes the financial collapse can sometimes happen, if you would. And so I think, if I remember correctly, this is based off of annual and then quarterly. So help me understand and make sure I'm just clear. Like, what is the shortest period of time that a charter school's, financial condition could deteriorate, you know, without us, without, us being aware, being able to implement and make their board aware and take action under this new policy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the I'll try to think of an example, Board Member Williams, but if something really crazy were to happen, that come to light, like some crazy fraud incident that no one knew anything about, neither us nor the school, I mean, that could happen very fast. And if we would ratchet up accountability immediately. And if it happens outside of the lottery timeline, we would not just go to the monitoring list, or we would just go to an FCAP. We could use the extra exigent circumstances to assert our authority quickly, and we would loop in and formally inform the board immediately. So, I mean, something like that could happen very fast. In the more traditional, just the typical monitoring, the the our guidance and this policy requires that we communicate with the board much sooner than we were obliged to in the past. And I think the fastest, and I even think this would be fast, for a school to decline, moving from otherwise healthy all the way onto an FCAP or a threat of revocation might be about a year, and I think that would be quite fast. But I would need to think through a really much more specific example to answer your question about what's the fastest that could happen. But the communication with the school's board, so giving them the opportunity to remedy, giving them the opportunity to take action, giving them the expectation to do their jobs, is to assert their authority, happens quite early in the process.
Okay. And then I guess two other questions. One, you just spoke to exigent circumstances.
Yeah.
Can you give me some examples of those and like what guardrails there are? I guess I want to make sure that, that's going to be the whole goal of this, right? Is to put down in writing and increase clarity for us and LEAs, their boards around these policies. And then, part of this is now also creating some flexibility for exigent circumstances. And I just want to make sure that I really understand what we're envisioning there.
Yes, thanks for the question. And I and the finance committee and our working group talked about this a lot. So it might be better for me to illustrate a non-exigent circumstance and why this works, and then I'll jump into that, the exigent part afterwards. The policy asks that we create an environment for you to make the decision you need to make to close a school in time for the lottery. That then takes a different type of planning on our part. We can't just do the whole process, extensive process in a week. There's real analysis, there's real engagement with the LEA, there's real research we have to do, and there's real behavior change that the school needs to exhibit. So it pushes our staff's timeline up to give the school the ability to make their change, and gives us the ability to offer transparency to school and families about a possible decline so that you can make your decision by February and March. We could not come up with every example in the whole wide world of why an LEA might find some sort of financial decline. And so the exigent circumstance clause asks or allows us and you all to make a challenging decision for a school if something comes up that out of the blue that we can't predict. Fraud is the easiest one to explain because it's conceptually simple to understand theft. But if a pattern of fraud occurred and it came to light in April, we would be required to act, and not wait until the following February based on what we already knew to be true. So the exigent circumstance just acknowledges that there are understandable gaps in our ability to predict every single type of financial distress an LEA might feel. Another thing that I want to remind us of is that we do have the authority to help a school shut down over a longer period of time. Often we want to make that fast and painless for a community, but we could stretch it out. We could make the decision to close a school in 14 months, for example. That's not necessarily optimal, but that's well within our authority. But the exigent circumstance gives us the ability to go ahead and make a challenging decision outside of the lottery timeline if we need to. But the expectation in the normal system to make a behavior change within the lottery time asks us to do a lot of work earlier to help plot the path and define health and failure earlier.
And would it also apply to a rapid decline?
It certainly could. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So last question here. You talked about a number of stakeholders. I know that a number of our LEAs outsource their financial management to third parties. Were any of those third parties involved in this policy? Do we have any indication that this policy would result in either those third parties increasing their cost and in the cost that our LEAs bear, and in my mind, more money going towards services versus directly to our kids into teaching? or and just talk to me about their involvement in that, how we've thought about that, and how do we think about the fact that so many of our LEAs do rely on these external operators for their finance.
Yeah, I mean, that question is very near to my heart. That is a decision that I had to make constantly when I was the lead financial leader of a LEA for almost a decade prior to being here. And so that resonates with me a lot, and I appreciate the question. We did engage both with schools that used EdOps. We engaged with schools and had members on our working group with schools that did not use EdOps. It was important that we didn't create a echo chamber. And we did engage with EdOps in particular as an agency organization that does support almost 2/3 of the back office of our LEAs. And uh, they, both the schools that use EdOps themselves, and schools that don't, gave us very valuable feedback as we worked on this policy, and we're very much a part of the conversation. I Of course, time will tell, and I think this is something that I hope that we'll be mindful of. But when I was a school leader, and what we get a lot of complaints about from our schools is kind of the last minute requests and the like urgent demands that PCSB places on a school is one of the things that drives up the cost of the of the bill with a third party, whether it's EdOps or someone else. And so both the refinements that the staff, the school finance team have done in their process, and the transparency and the measuredness of their policy, the clear expectations outlined in the implementation guidance, and the clear definitions of what's revocable, created an environment where there should be, and already have shown to be, dramatically less last minute requests. And so if a third party vendor or just a normal FTE CFO is plotting the path that they can understand what's coming, what reporting expectations are coming, what a failed KFI is and what it isn't, then they can lead the organization in a more proactive way as opposed to reactive. And you can imagine a reactive overnight demand that's going to cost overtime. It's going to be more expensive. So my prediction is that, and this may be something worth tracking, is that demands on the finance team, whether it's third party or not, should be more planful, and over time, therefore, one might hope that they become less expensive for the people you're outsourcing, because you're making less last minute calls to fill a gap under all means necessary.
All right. Thank you, Will. I think that answers the questions that I had here.
Thank you, Board Member Williams. Board Member Sam.
Thank you. I have a follow-up to a question that Tony asked. I heard you say a couple of times that when you're giving notice, you give notice to the board chair. I don't think that's adequate. I think when we're giving notice, we should give notice to the entire board. I've seen in other contexts situations where communications about an important matter to a chair alone never make it to the board. We're talking to the full board. We're talking about if the communications that you're talking about are highly significant. You're assuming that I think you're assuming that if you give it to the board is, of course, going to circulate it to the entire board. The chair is going to circulate it to the entire board. I don't think you should assume that. I've seen that happen too many times. Matters of the significance that you're referring to need to go directly to every board member.
Thanks, Board Member Samian. I appreciate that perspective, and that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Sandman. Will, just one final question in the pulling together of this policy. Just would love to hear, as we think about other authorizers in the country, how does this policy stand up to that? And yeah, let's just go there.
Yeah, thanks. I'll kick it off, and William Half from Yield might offer a couple other comments. It was important to me, Chair Adamafanian, and to all of us that we did not write and create this policy in a vacuum. We wanted to be responsive to the needs of DC, but we also wanted to understand what was happening in other areas of the country. We looked at financial policies from authorizers in Colorado, the Colorado Charter Schools Institute. We looked at information put out by Missouri Charter Public School Commission, Massachusetts, and SUNY out of New York. So we took a lot of different perspectives, not just ours in DC, but others as well. And I believe at this point that our policy and how it evolves, DC School Reform Act, certainly holds muster to the other schools, and I believe it will offer clarity to other authorizers in the nation that are looking to us about what financial health looks like and what the expectations are of an authorizer should place on their schools. William, do you want to offer anything else about how we engaged on the national level?
Thanks, Will. Good evening, Chair Adamafanian and board members. The process, the SRA is a little bit distinctive in how it addresses financial accountability in terms of calling out the three bases for revocation on financial grounds. So I'd say articulately, if not briefly, and is distinct in terms of that's different from statutes, charter laws across the country that in statute are usually a little more general. And so the work was, especially at the policy level, to make it very much as Member Sandman articulated, very much aligned to the statute and to the law in that way. But then to be able to connect it from there through the implementation to best practices around the country, which are more transferable when it gets to the oversight practices and the metrics, the specific financial oversight metrics. And so that's where the Missouri approach and Massachusetts and SUNY, we were able to, and others draw from, and also NACSA's kind of ongoing work in this area, draw on what was the best thinking. And I would say in many ways, take that best thinking a step or two forward. The financial working group and the finance committee in collaboration developed some additional or refined some metrics that I think put it in a place where I think it can be a model for others.
Got it. Thank you so much. I believe we have one other question. Treasurer Stanley Beatty, I know you have one other question, then I have the final. I promise you. We keep saying the final, and it's not. I promise you. One more after me. The next time you hear, that's it. William, Will, y'all go off.
I'm not holding my breath.
I know. Just bear with me. Trying something new. All right, Carissa.
Thank you, Chair Adamafani. And I'll be transparent. My question is not one of my own. I actually wanted to pick up on something that was mentioned in public comment, Will. So there was comment about how this policy interfaces or interacts with relinquishment, right? We speak quite a bit about revocation because obviously that's one of the conclusions that we can sort of manage or drive towards through the policy and implementation guide. But we know that many financial failures end in the school actually relinquishing. And so how does that interface with this policy?
So yes, great. It's a great question. This policy does not speak to our or the school's behavior around relinquishment. The SRA tells us how to behave, when to revoke, and this policy offers better definitions and gives us grounds to write a stronger implementation guide to know when to revoke. It does not speak to relinquishment. My understanding and
The SRA doesn't speak to relinquishment.
no. The SRA does speak to relinquishment
Okay.
in another part of the SRA.
Got it.
This policy, but relinquishment doesn't necessarily have anything to do with finances. Revocation, though, the SRA gives us clarity about what to do. The SRA tells us what to do when we must revoke, and this policy is offering clarity there.
Yes.
There's a scenario where an LEA relinquishes their charter. It could be for finances, it could be for any number of things. That is their prerogative, their board's policy. And my understanding from Miss Brantley's testimony, I think that was her that mentioned that, is that now that we have a clarity on standards for how to predict and lead up to a revocation and what will happen that can help us all predict and get a revocation to occur in the lottery, she's looking for something similar, some similar guidance for how to behave if an LEA relinquishes. I think in particular, she mentioned the Eagle relinquishment. In that scenario, there may have been a world where Eagle went through the rest of the year and closed at the following January lottery, but the board relinquished in, I think, August. And that was very challenging for those students and regrettable on every term. And this addresses that. But my reading between the lines a little bit is that there's an opportunity for this board and us to consider how to behave if a board shares with us that they've relinquished. It's not specifically because of finances. Of course, that's the most recent one in our memory. Actually, it's not the most recent one. That's the most challenging one. But I think that's what the call is. Do a similar level of research and interrogation for how we might behave in light of a relinquishment.
In light of a pending or expected relinquishment, right? Because obviously, at the end of the day, the relinquishment is the LEA's prerogative. That's what makes it challenging, is that it's their own prerogative. But I think it's an interesting conversation, and I think it's something that we could discuss.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, I think it's right.
Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. Okay, for real. Last question. I promise you. So thank you again, Will and team. Thank you, William, for your work as well, and supporting our committee and the working group to come up with this policy. My final question, we've heard a lot of recommendations here tonight, everything from releasing the implementation guide to considering sharing this with all LEA board members, et cetera. Dr. Walker Davis, could you speak to sort of how this will all be reflected in the final version of the policy that will be voted on in September? And specifically speaking to whether this is more of a practice change rather than a policy change. Are folks gonna get an amendment? Like, can you just talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So as we do with other policies, well, first I want to remind folks that the public comment period for this particular policy closed today, August 31st. So as we do for other policies, when we bring this back to the board for a final vote, which is scheduled for September, we will update our proposal to summarize any public comment that we received, how we responded to that public comment, if that public comment led to suggested amendments to the policy. We will do all of that and bring you a version for final vote. In addition to that, we will name anything else that might have informed either minor or significant changes to the policy for you to consider. With respect to some of the things that we've heard today, I also want to name that while Will discussed our practice of informing the board chair of various escalating financial oversight issues, we also currently have the practice of informing the entire board of when a school is on the financial monitoring list and when a school receives a financial corrective action plan. So my sense is that it does not require a lot of change in our current practice to have the full board aware of more of the escalation in our financial oversight. And I don't believe that that requires a change in policy. we may make that clear in the implementation guide if it's not that clear now. And I think you asked, I think that addressed both of your questions. You will get another proposal at the time of the vote, and it will highlight if there are any changes from this public hearing to what we ultimately put in front of you. Oh, and the last thing is I will reiterate the commitment to have the implementation guidance out once the board approves the final policy.
Okay, and so I'm just repeating back because I want to make sure I have it clear, and I suspect the rest of the public. You all, as staff, will now take the public comment that you've heard, tonight's conversation, refine the proposal that will go before the board, that will vote on, that will be voted on, highlighting where the public comment has helped to refine the proposed recommendation, and then we'll go forward from there.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. Will, I told you that was the last one. I meant that. So thank you again, Will and team, for your work on this. I want to echo the same kudos and congratulations to you all for what you've come up with. Special kudos, congratulations to Treasurer Stanley Beatty. I know that the team has worked very hard, and we will actually be voting on this policy next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Public meeting. All right. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Secretary Marino, please conduct a roll call vote.
Chair Adamafanian,
Aye.
Vice Chair Yan,
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty,
Aye.
Board Member Sandman,
Aye.
Board Member Williams,
Aye.
Board Member Smith,
Aye.
and I am an aye. Chair, the motion carries.
Gotta love Robert's rules. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll now yield the floor to Treasurer Stanley Beatty to introduce the finance report. Treasurer?
Thank you, Chair Adamafania. I will yield the floor to Mr. Henderson and his team.
Y'all are just getting an earful from me today.
We love you. Go ahead.
You remember that next time you're mad at me, Chair. Actually, last year we instituted the monthly financial oversight report, and I did those, I think, at most board meetings last year. We're going to continue that practice this year. But in fact, my colleague Joanna Hahn, Director of School Finance, is going to share today's report. So I'll pass it over to you, Joanna.
Thanks, Will. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joanna Hahn, and I am DC PCSB's Director of School Finance. Really happy to be here tonight. I'm going to give a quick overview of the monthly update on financial oversight. In the month of July, DC PCSB's Finance Committee met to discuss the financial status of schools under an FCAP, or a Financial Corrective Action Plan, or any of the LEAs that were on our monitoring list. We also discussed the approval and implementation timeline of the financial oversight policy, as you all know, and the board also received an orientation to DCPCSB's internal budgeting. To provide a specific update on DC Wildflower PCS, who is currently under an FCAP, the school's fiscal 26 fourth quarter financial statements were in compliance with its FCAP. Additionally, DC PCSB reviewed the school's budget for FY27 and FY28 and deemed them both reasonable and in compliance with the requirements of the FCAP. The LEA was able to successfully extend its Aussie loan, which was originally set to mature in FY27, and it's been successfully extended to FY2030. And the next FCAP milestone that we will be monitoring for will be in October, when the staff will review school year 27 first certification enrollment data. I can also report out that since our June 29th board meeting, DCPCSB has not issued any new citations of fiscal concern, and there have been no changes to our financial monitoring list, with the exception of the removal of Capital Village PCS following the relinquishment of its charter effective as of June 30th, 2026, at which point we removed that LEA from our monitoring list.
Thanks, Joanna. Any questions from our board?
Yeah, Will, can I just ask a quick question on DC Wildflower? And I'm probably just missing it. So I see where we did the update about them receiving the extension on the one Aussie loan. Is one bigger than the other one? One of them is the reason why they were on the monitoring list to begin with, because they have two, right? I'm asking because of the way we wrote it. I understand now that they're coterminous, but my specific question is, was it the one that was extended that was sort of the impetus to them being on the monitoring list?
Yes, I think that's right. And if
Okay.
I'm not sure if Katie is here who's the one closest to monitoring the super specific nuances of that.
Okay.
But if she's not able to join us quickly, we can answer that following the meeting shortly.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, here she comes.
Yep, I'm here. I'm off camera, unfortunately, though. So the reason they were added to the monitoring list was not related to the status of the Aussie loan. It was really about the below target KFIs and then over reliance on the private contributions.
Yep.
If I recall correctly, there are two Aussie loans.
Yep.
The larger one was the one that was just extended.
Okay. All right. Okay. And so that's why we're making note of it, because it's now coterminous with the other one and they both mature in 2029.
Yeah, and not only that, but also this was a pretty critical thing that they needed to do in order to remain economically viable because they don't have the cash reserves to make that balloon payment.
That's what I'm getting at. So that's why we're calling it out, because it was a balloon payment that they now no longer have to make.
Exactly.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't the thing that put them on the monitoring list. It was the thing that we added to the F cap to clarify what would make them more financially healthy.
It would have exacerbated the problem had it come due.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Thanks, Treasurer. Any other questions?
All right. Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty and Will, for providing this update. All right, next we'll vote on the consent calendar. Would any board member like to remove an item from the calendar for further discussion or state a recusal for the record? All right. Colleagues, I will now entertain a motion.
Move to approve all items on the consent calendar.
Second.
Very good. Secretary Marino, please conduct a roll call vote.
Chair Adamafanian.
Oh, I was going to say I'll cast my vote last.
Oh, okay. I'll
Yes.
start with Vice Chair Yan.
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Board Member Sandman.
Aye.
Board Member Williams.
Aye.
Board Member Smith.
Aye.
I am an aye for Chair Adamafanian.
Thank you for indulging me. I'm an aye as well. All right. Thank you very much for that. All right. So for the public, I'll note in this next section here, I'll note that we're reading into the record the creation of two new board committees, the Sector Planning Committee and the Academic Data and Accountability Committee. Both committees will get up and running in the next few months, so there will be more information to come shortly about membership, committee objectives, and the like. And as they begin meeting and reporting back to the rest of the board about the work. Yes. Board Member Salmon, I see your hand.
Yes, I just want to make a suggestion. I think anytime the board establishes a new committee or committees, the first order of business for each committee should be to draft a charter that describes its roles and responsibilities to be approved by the board. I think that's important both for the board and for the public. Like the names of these committees, Academic Data and Accountability Committee and the Sector Planning Committee, they're not self-explanatory. I think there are likely to be a lot of questions about what's that about. So I think we should be public about it, but I also think that the board should have a clear understanding of and have an opportunity to approve what the charter of each committee is.
Thank you. Point well taken, Board Member Salmon. And I think in the coming months we'll get that going. Appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there any new business? Okay. Since we've completed tonight's agenda, if there are no objections, I now declare this meeting adjourned. All righty, no objections. We'll see you next month. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.